There is a quiet yet profound truth operating in every moment of life. Human beings long for freedom, yet constantly bind themselves with invisible restraints. We want peace, yet we cling tightly to the very things that disturb the mind. We want lightness, yet we fill our hearts with expectations, fears, and memories that refuse to loosen their grip. And so, in the journey of seeking freedom, we unintentionally construct the most sophisticated prisons of all, the prison of attachment. Attachment does not always appear in obvious forms. Sometimes it hides under the names love, responsibility, dream, goal. We cling to a person because we fear loneliness. We cling to an achievement because we fear becoming meaningless. We cling to a belief because we fear facing uncertainty. Each of these threads intertwines, forming a delicate web in which we do not even realize we are trapped. When a relationship changes, we suffer. When a plan collapses, we are shaken. When praise disappears, we feel empty. These emotions do not arise naturally from circumstances. They sprout from attachment, from the idea that everything must remain as we wish it to be. We do not only love a person, we love the sense of security that person brings. We do not only pursue a goal, we pursue the image of a successful self we have constructed. And when reality no longer matches that picture, the mind begins to surge like restless waves. Have we ever asked ourselves, if we did not cling to that, would we still be who we are? The fear of losing seemed so immense that we would rather hold on to suffering than step into the emptiness of letting go. We confuse letting go with losing. We think that if we do not hold on, we will fall into nothingness. Yet it is precisely because we hold too tightly that we lose the vitality of the present moment. The truth about attachment is not a judgment, but an invitation to look deeply. When we observe our mind in moments of anxiety or jealousy, we will see that its root is fear. Fear of loss, fear of change, fear of not being enough, fear of a future that does not unfold as expected, and because we fear, we cling. The more we cling, the more exhausted we become. The more exhausted we become, the more we try to control. That circle repeats itself, turning freedom into a distant concept. But freedom is not found in escaping this world. It does not require us to abandon all relationships or extinguish every aspiration. Freedom begins with changing the way we relate to them. When we love without demanding that the other fulfill all our expectations, love becomes lighter. When we work without equating our worth with results, effort becomes serene. When we live with the understanding that everything is impermanent, we no longer panic in the face of change. Attachment makes us believe that happiness lies in holding on to what we desire. Freedom opens another horizon. Happiness lies in the ability to accept and adapt to what is. When we stop forcing reality to follow our will, a vast space appears. In that space, the mind no longer contracts or stiffens. It becomes soft and flexible, like water, able to flow through every shape without losing its essence. It is paradoxical that the very things we cling to for safety become the source of insecurity. We worry because we fear losing the one we love. We feel pressured because we fear failure. We suffer because we fear others will not see us as we wish to be seen. But if we look deeply, we will see that suffering does not come from that person or that circumstance, but from our excessive identification with them. We place the entire meaning of life upon a fragile support, and then panic when that support trembles. The truth about attachment and freedom is not a distant philosophical tale. It is present in each small daily thought. When we feel sad because of a careless remark, when we become angry because we are not acknowledged, when we are unsettled by an unexpected change, these are the moments when we can see what we are holding on to. And precisely in those moments, the door to freedom quietly opens. Freedom does not arrive when everything is perfect. Freedom arrives when we no longer demand perfection. It is not cold indifference, but a deep understanding that everything is in motion. People change, circumstances change, emotions change. Even we ourselves are constantly transforming. When we learn to live with that flow instead of resisting it, we begin to taste a different flavor of life, the flavor of lightness. Perhaps that journey is not easy. Letting go of attachments that have nourished us for many years requires courage, but that very courage opens a wider space within the mind. There, we are no longer defined by what we possess or by who stands beside us. We are simply present as a living being who breathes, feels, and learns, and in that presence, a truth gradually reveals itself. Freedom is not something we achieve at the end of the path. It is a state that appears when we stop binding ourselves to illusions of control. When the hen loosens its grip, we realize we never truly needed to hold on so tightly. If the opening is an invitation to look into invisible bondage, then the body is the journey into the subtle structure of attachment, where we began to see clearly why we suffer and why we fear freedom. Attachment is not merely liking something, it is identifying ourselves with it. When we say, that person is my everything, this job is my life, this belief is who I am, we are placing the entire value of our existence onto something that is constantly changing. And because that thing never stands still, our mind can never truly rest. Observe the way we love. At first, love is a natural vibration, a joy in sharing, but very quickly it turns into expectation. We want the other person to always understand us, always prioritize us, always be there for us. When their mood shifts, when their rhythm changes, or when they are simply tired and silent, we immediately feel uneasy. We begin to interpret, to blame, to control. What we fear is not the change itself, but the feeling of no longer being assured. And so, instead of loving in freedom, we love in anxiety. Attachment operates on a foundational illusion, the illusion of absolute permanence. We want everything to last according to our wishes, but the nature of life is movement. Everything is passing through. Emotions, people, circumstances, even this very body. When we fix something in the mind as it must always remain this way, we are resisting the law by which reality functions, and any resistance creates friction. That friction is suffering. Not only in relationships, attachment also seeps into how we view ourselves. We cling to the image of a successful person, a good person, a strong person. When failure occurs, we are not only sad about the outcome, we hurt because that image cracks. We feel as if we are no longer ourselves, but in truth, the self we are trying to preserve is only a story constructed by the mind. The more that story is repeated, the more we believe it to be reality. Freedom begins when we dare to see those stories, not to deny them, but to understand that they are not our unchanging essence. We may succeed today and fail tomorrow, yet the life within us does not lose its value. We may be loved today and lonely another day, yet our capacity to feel and to learn remains intact. One of the most subtle forms of attachment is attachment to positive emotions. We want to hold on to happiness, excitement, peace, but when we cling to them, we unintentionally create the fear of losing them, and that fear prevents us from fully enjoying what is present. We live in a defensive posture, constantly bracing for change. Instead of expanding, the mind contracts. Freedom does not mean rejecting emotions. On the contrary, freedom is the ability to experience them fully without being drowned. When joy comes, we know it comes and will go. When sadness appears, we know it is also a cloud drifting across the sky of awareness. We do not need to push it away, nor do we need to grasp it. We only need to recognize it. That recognition creates a healthy space between us and what is happening, not a cold distance, but a space in which to breathe. In that space, we have the power to choose our response instead of being carried away. We can love without controlling. We can work without tormenting ourselves if the results are not as expected. We can move forward when something old departs. Going deeper, we see that attachment is always accompanied by a fragile ego. That ego needs validation, reassurance, constant reinforcement. When someone praises us, it swells. When someone criticizes us, it shrinks. We believe we are protecting ourselves, but in truth we are protecting a psychological structure that is inherently unstable. And because it is unstable, we continuously seek something outside to strengthen it. Freedom appears when we no longer depend entirely on that validation. When praise does not intoxicate us, and criticism does not collapse us, the mind begins to stand on its own. This does not happen overnight. It is the result of patient observation, of repeatedly noticing what we are clinging to and gently letting it go. Letting go does not mean abandoning responsibility. It means acting with full dedication without forcing outcomes to conform to the ego. We still love wholeheartedly, but we do not turn the other person into our sole source of life. We still make our utmost effort, but we do not attach our entire worth to success. We still dream, but we are ready to adapt when the path changes. There is a strange lightness when we truly release a major attachment. It is as if an invisible weight falls from our shoulders, not because circumstances have improved, but because the mind is no longer gripping tightly. In that relaxation, we discover that we are not as fragile as we once believed. We can move through loss, we can rise after collapse, we can continue living without needing to keep everything intact. Gradually, freedom is no longer an abstract concept. It becomes a tangible experience in each moment. The moment we choose to listen instead of react, the moment we accept instead of resist, the moment we smile at change instead of panic. The truth about attachment and freedom does not lie in eliminating all bonds, but in transforming the way we hold them. When the hand opens, we can still touch the world, yet we are no longer bound by it. And in that openness, a vast space slowly reveals itself. The space of inner steadiness, of unconditional love, of a life no longer governed by the fear of loss. Non-attachment does not mean becoming cold or indifferent to life. On the contrary, it is a mature and profound inner state in which we still live, still love, still strive, but no longer bind ourselves to outcomes, to people, or to images constructed by the mind. When there is no attachment, a series of quiet transformations begins to unfold in our inner life. The first benefit is inner peace. When we no longer cling to the idea that everything must unfold according to our will, we reduce conflict with reality. We do not react intensely to change. An unsuccessful plan no longer means the collapse of the self. A changing relationship no longer represents the ultimate loss. The mind becomes more supple in the face of fluctuation, like a tree that knows how to bend before the wind instead of breaking. The second benefit is a reduction in anxiety and fear. Most worrying arises from fearing the loss of what we hold or fearing that we will not attain what we desire. When we do not place all our happiness on an external condition, fear gradually loses its power. We may still wish for things, but we no longer tremble because of the outcome. This freedom allows the nervous system to relax. The mind no longer has to remain constantly on guard. The third benefit is that relationships become healthier. Without attachment, we love others for who they are, not for how they meet our needs. We control less, feel less jealousy, demand less. This creates space for trust and respect to grow. The other person no longer feels bound, and we no longer live in fear of abandonment. Love therefore becomes more natural and gentle. Another profound benefit is a greater capacity for adaptation. Life is always changing, and a person free from attachment can remain flexible in all circumstances. When work changes, they adjust instead of complaining. When opportunities arise, they open themselves without being held back by the past. When loss occurs, they grieve but do not remain submerged for too long. This flexibility is an inner strength. Non-attachment also helps us see the true nature of ourselves. When we no longer cling to a fixed image of me, we can explore new aspects of who we are. We are no longer confined by labels such as I must always be strong or I am not allowed to fail. We allow ourselves to learn, to make mistakes, and to grow. It is precisely this lack of rigid identification that opens the door to continuous development. Another benefit is an increased focus on the present. Attachment often pulls the mind back to the past or pushes it toward the future. We regret what has passed or worrying about what has not yet come. When we loosen our grasp, it becomes easier to return to the present moment. We eat with mindfulness. We listen with presence. We work with wholeness. Life therefore becomes deeper, no longer a chain of days dominated by endless thinking. Non-attachment also brings a sense of inner freedom. We are no longer entirely controlled by praise or criticism. Our self-worth no longer depends on the recognition of others. When praised, we are happy but not intoxicated. When criticized, we listen but do not collapse. This self-mastery allows us to live steadily in a constantly changing society. Finally, the greatest benefit of non-attachment is the ability to experience life fully. When we are not afraid of loss, we dare to love more deeply. When we are not afraid of failure, we dare to challenge ourselves. When we are not afraid of change, we dare to step into new journeys. Letting go does not make life dull, it makes life expansive. Non-attachment is not a state achieved in a single day. It is the result of continuous observation, of repeatedly recognizing what we are clinging to and gently loosening our grip. But each time we release a little, we feel a little more lightness, And that lightness is the clearest evidence of the benefit of inner freedom. When we reach the end of the story about attachment and freedom, what remains may not be a philosophical concept, but a very real feeling in the heart. For too long, we have lived in tightness, gripping a person, a dream, a memory, a belief about ourselves. We thought that if we let go, everything would dissolve. But the tighter we held on, the more exhausted we became. And then there are very quiet nights when all the noise settles, and we realize that it was the holding itself that drained us. Freedom is not running away from life. Freedom is the ability to stand in the midst of life without the mind being bound. We still love, but we do not turn love into a chain. We still strive, but we do not turn success into the condition for allowing ourselves to be worthy of love. We still dream, but we do not despair if the road turns in another direction. In that loosening, we do not lose anything that truly belongs to us. On the contrary, we rediscover the steadiness we once tried to seek outside. Some may ask, if there is no attachment, does life become dull? The answer lies in one's own experience. When we are no longer afraid of loss, we dare to love more deeply. When we are no longer afraid of failure, we dare to go further. When we are no longer afraid of being hurt, we dare to open our hearts more sincerely. Non-attachment does not make the heart cold. It makes the heart wider. A wide-open heart no longer shrinks in anxiety, but can embrace both joy and sorrow as natural aspects of life. This journey does not unfold overnight. There will be times when we unconsciously cling again. There will be moments of worrying, fear, the urge to control. But the difference is this: we begin to recognize it. Recognition itself is light. Each time we notice that we are gripping something and choose to loosen, even just a little, we take another step on the path of freedom. There is no need to be perfect, no need to become a person without emotions. We only need to be honest with ourselves and gentle enough to let go when necessary. One day, when we look back, we will see how much we have changed. The things that once kept us awake at night no longer carry the same weight. The criticisms that once shattered us become merely perspectives to consider. The losses that once seemed impossible to overcome become lessons that help us mature, not because life has become easier, but because our mind has become less attached. And perhaps freedom is not waiting at the end of the road as a reward. It is present in each moment we choose to release instead of tighten, to understand instead of blame, to accept instead of resist. Freedom is when we can watch something leave and still remain at peace. Freedom is when we can step into something new without being bound by the past. Freedom is when we realize that our worth does not depend on any external condition. If these reflections touch something within you, if you have ever felt exhausted from holding on to too much, perhaps this is the moment to begin practicing gentle release. Not letting go of everything at once, but letting go little by little. Observe a worrying and ask, what am I afraid of losing? Look at an anger and ask, what image am I clinging to? These simple questions can open the door to freedom. The inner journey is never truly a solitary one. Every sharing, every perspective, every experience spoken aloud can become light for someone else. So if you have your own thoughts or stories about attachment and freedom, leave a comment below. Perhaps your experience will help someone realize they are not alone on this path. And if you feel that content like this brings value, helping you reflect more deeply on life and the inner world. Subscribe to the channel to continue walking together in the next topics. Each subscription is not just a number, but a connection between souls seeking peace and awareness. Finally, remember that you do not need to become someone else to be free. You only need the courage to look at where you are gripping and the bravery to open your hand. When the hand opens, the heart opens, and when the heart opens, life, though still impermanent and ever-changing, is no longer a burden, but a flow you can walk within with lightness and depth.